I'm going to talk about propaganda against men in this video and how it either slides under the radar or gets ignored by men or even embraced by men. And we're going to use examples such as Sin City, Ex Machina, the Barbie film, and of course, The Handmaid's Tale. But I'm also going to include the Margaret Atwood's Cat's Eye novel, right? Now, this young fellow, Snee, he discusses propaganda, and let's hear what he has to say.
We storytelling YouTubers are always kind of preaching the gospel of how amazing stories are and all the good that they do. Reality is that it's a tool like anything else. It's a very, very powerful tool, and it can do terrible things, but not if a viewer goes in prepared with a full understanding of the underhanded emotional manipulations that these stories use. So what we're going to do is we're going to disinfect some of the most sinister media out there by shining a light on these tactics, and hopefully we will make the world a better place. So there are two types of propaganda. One is very easy to protect yourself from. You don't need any guidance with regard to that category. And that's propaganda directed at already loyal believers. It's for
Now, he's wrong about that. That is easily protected against because the Barbie film was an obvious feminist film. It's even said so. The plastic feminism of Barbie. And guys, they ignore it. They don't know how to defend themselves at all, even though it's obvious. I mean, this reviewer, she doesn't say, oh, the feminism is bad. Her critique is that it's plastic. Its hatred towards men isn't authentic enough, right? And also, he says for loyal believers, zealots, and insiders. The sad part is that's every woman. My female relatives went and saw this film, enjoyed it, and came out and bragged it up. You don't have to, you're not a zealot if you're a feminist. You're just the average woman. It is the nature of the average woman that you know. So there's no extremist. It's either you are or you aren't. So it's not easy for men to defend themselves. We've got to overcome our nature to put up a proper fight.
insiders. And this is the super preachy, super patriotic, or super religious, over dramatic, cringe as fuck slop that you can spot a mile away. And it's mostly created to strengthen the passion of the casual believer and to give existing zealots material to indulge with, its ideology, basically. But the other category,
Which, by the way, is why I'm bringing up, which is it? Ex Machina. Ex Machina, as far as I'm concerned, is obvious feminist propaganda. But when I brought it up to guys, they would try and deny it. They'd try and deny it. They would say, no, this is a movie about consciousness. They discuss consciousness, which means they have to ignore what's being shown in the scene. Right? What's happening in the scene? This is the genius creator who created this android in female form, and he clubbed her and is dragging her by the legs back to his lair, supposedly for sex. So the propaganda is that the even the best of men are just a bunch of rapist thugs. That's the propaganda that we're seeing on the screen, right? And even though the android is an it, as soon as it dons a female form, it becomes human, right? It has disgust at the male sex. So they're saying men are so disgusting and so vile, even a machine wouldn't bang us. But also, to be female is to be human. This is no longer an object as long as once it dons the female form. Take a look at this in the next feed. Billionaire has been keeping the android women captive. They're just machines. How could he keep them captive? Right? It's kind of frightening to think that women see their humanity as just being female. Makes me wonder if female, if being female disappeared, would women disappear? Would they never consider themselves as human anymore? Right? But the point is, even obvious stuff men can't see. They refuse to see it.
Propaganda is significantly less easy to even recognize. And that's propaganda that's made for non-believers, for skeptics, for outsiders. And the intention here is not to fully convince them, but to break down their emotional barriers to the ideology, sometimes so subtly that they don't even realize it, and to make the extreme stuff feel more palatable, relatable, and less spooky.
And the sad part is, what he's talking about isn't necessary for guys, right? For example, Sim City, right? Here's an example which shows that it's ingrained. It's innate to men. As soon as boys hit puberty, they want to pander to women at the expense of other men. No propaganda is necessary. Now, here's a film from Frank Miller, Sin City, and I watched it when it came out, and I liked it, right? And someone else had to point out how anti-male it was. And as soon as they did, I went, yeah, I see what you're talking about. Because there are good guys and the bad guys. Why are the bad guys bad? Were they robbing banks? No. Because then they'd just be petty thieves. They're bad because they hurt a woman or a girl, a female. That's what makes them bad. What makes the hero the hero? Well, he's fighting the bad guys, so he can get validation from the girl, right? Guys will instinctively identify with this guy, the hero, even though he's not really heroic. Not really. Because he's just harming another man to pander to someone of the opposite sex. Now, again, when someone pointed that out to me, I went, oh, yeah, I can see it. It's so obvious now. And this is not the only scene. The whole movie, Frank Miller movie, is women getting hurt by men and then the hero coming in to rescue them. See, if you'll show it here, there's our other male hero. He's out to defend the woman from the bad guy, right? So this is all under the radar. But none of it is necessary because the stuff that's out in the open, guys ignore anyway, or just in straight denial of what was happening in it. So the fact that it's not necessary, and yet it still exists, that's still being pumped out, that shows you how much society hates men. So back into this.
I'm going to use as my example in this video, the most well-crafted example of this second type of propaganda that I have ever seen, bar none. The movie is called Hero. It came out in 2002, stars Jet Li, Zhang Ziyi. It was a huge block.
By the way, this film, he's right, because it did fool me. It did fool me. I was actually brought over to the emperor's side. You know, the emperor is conquering all the land, right? But he's not a bad guy. He just wants to unite the land and have one language for everyone. He's a good guy. But it fooled me. It's not till I looked back at it years after that I went, oh, yeah, I see what's going on here, right?
We're dealing with here. The story of Hero takes place over 2,000 years ago. China at this time is a bunch of warring states, and the first Qin emperor was out to conquer all of them. He was trying to make a unified China for the first time ever. And spoiler, he eventually does do this historically. He builds the Great Wall, or part of it, but it was through this really, really bloody military campaign. And the movie intro tells us that because of that bloody campaign, there have been several high-profile assassination attempts on this king, specifically from 3 infamous assassins. And our story begins with the news that this random no-name backwater policeman has single-handedly taken out all 3 of these assassins with his insane sword skills. And when I say no name, by the way, I mean that literally.
I was orphaned at a young age and was never given a name. People simply called me nameless.
So, Nameless arrives in the capital to receive his reward, and he begins to tell the story of how he accomplished this unbelievably heroic feat. And as he goes on, something isn't lining up. Something is off. The king is suspicious of his story, and he realizes something.
You don't
Among
need
the
to,
rewards for killing these assassins was the honor of drinking in the
let's get to the switch.
Okay, I want to talk about 10 tactics that this movie uses to make its message palatable to viewers who walk in not having fascist beliefs, never having had a fascist thought in their lives. And just to be clear, we're using this specific example with this specific ideology, but these tactics could be used just as easily for the opposite ideology, or a religious ideology, or flat earth, or lizard people conspiracies, or happy happyists, or anything. Any point A to point Z ideological shift that requires the separate.
Again, all this isn't even necessary for us guys. It's already ingrained. You don't have to convince us that the good guys are the good guys. The guys murdering other men so that they can playgate to women. You don't need to convince us, right? We already believe that in our hearts. Men are automatically fascist by nature once we hit puberty. Okay.
And manipulation to achieve, you're going to see the most effective propaganda out there employing these exact kinds of tactics. So tactic number one, the propaganda message of this media doesn't arrive until the last act. The fascinating thing about this movie at first glance, this movie which is explicitly fascist in its messaging, is that maybe 90% of it is explicitly anti-fascist in its messaging, and yet that doesn't prevent 100% of it from eventually being ideologically fascist by the end, because that last decision of the main character switches the entire movie to supporting those ideals. But if you...
Exactly. Yet, again, it's not necessary. In Ex Machina, the men were shown to be the bad guys from the very beginning. Even the good guy, even the guy who actually freed this android was turned on by her, right? Because he deserved it. There are no good males, right? In the Barbie movie, especially, it was propaganda from the very beginning. You know, Barbie wears high heels. Why? Because men are making her, right? So again, none of this is necessary for men, right?
young, innocent viewer with your good and virtuous Western values of freedom and individualism and democracy sat down and watched the first 2/3 of this movie, you would not see anything concerning about its messaging at all. And the way this works is really, really intuitive. If you're writing a story to persuade a skeptic, an outsider, and you make the protagonist have the belief that the audience skeptic person is skeptical of, if you make a religious propaganda movie for atheists and the main character is a Bible-thumping missionary, the skeptic is going to turn off immediately, obviously. But if the movie is for atheists and you make the protagonist an atheist, make them someone who scoffs at believers and has sound logical arguments against the existence of God, and you give us this whole movie about them fighting for secularism and atheism, and then make them only find God at the very end, then you are not addressing yourself to a closed-off skeptic audience person. You are talking to a totally open skeptic who has to actively close themselves off if they want to resist its messaging. And that is a much easier sell. Hero is about a character who's going to put an end to years.
Exactly. But again, it's not necessarily like Sin City is all under the radar. Again, Barbie movie is right up in your face. It doesn't matter. They're all accepted. Now, I'm going to talk about The Handmaid's Tale, right? Now, I listened to some of it on audiobook. I couldn't stomach the whole thing, but there was some bullshit in that. It's all about, look, it says this is how democracy dies. That itself is propaganda. That's why I listened to this guy, she at the beginning, because when it comes to, they're trying to hide it under the idea that this is democracy. But what happens in this lack of democracy? Women's sexuality is given to men, right? They don't get it to sell it themselves. They're forced to give it away for free to certain men, not every guy, right? And so it's all about sex, women's sexuality. It's not about democracy. And one of the characters in there, she was an older woman, made this lying claim that feminist women fought for the freedom of sex in her day. And she was saying it to a young couple, saying, hey, you know, the reason you two can make out with one another is because what us women did, right? It's only the evil males who wanted to control your sexuality. A complete propagandist, bold-faced lie. Now, I also want to bring to the cat's eye. Margaret Atwood wrote this. Now, I actually read this novel, period. Not just an audiobook, I actually read it. And this is a novel about girls abusing one another. They're all friends, and one is abusive to the other. And the other girl, the protagonist, suffers all this abuse, right? And it was very honest. This is why I brought it to this here. Where is it? At the very beginning, it Margaret Atwood uses honesty. See, this is how girls actually behave, which is 100% true. But what was the spin at the end? Well, that the men made them do it. The men made them do it. You see, the protagonist, she was being abused by her friend, but it's not because girls can be cruel or sadistic. It's because her friend Cordelia, who was doing the abusing, her father was abusing her. That's the switch up. That's the switch up. It's like the only reason this girl was being a sadist to her friend isn't because she enjoyed it. It's because her father was doing this to her. Guys, it's men's fault. Now, like I said, it slides under the radar like Sin City, or it's embraced like Barbie, or I shouldn't say embraced, it's ignored, like, but it's embraced by male feminists like this cred, right? Now, this guy is talking about Cat's Eye, and I read the novel, so I know he's bullshitting. Now, let's see what he has to say.
Might have been. So to talk about this novel, like in the case of many of Atwood's other works, you have to take a look at the story through the lens of a kind of gendered, structured society. This novel comes just after the
No, no, this is bullshit. Gendered structured society. It was a novel about friendship and how one friend could be cruel to another. That's what it was. This was strictly about female dynamics. So this guy has already told a bold-faced lie.
Handmaid's Tale, and though it's set in 1950s Canada and not a dystopia, from that plot summary you can kind of see that the rigid structure of gender norms can have just as much of an impact on some.
This is not about gender norms. Bullshit. Matter of fact, in the novel, the Cordelia's family, her sisters and her mother, they'd all be prim and proper while the husband was around. And as soon as they left, they let their hair down and partied. They were leeching off this man. Her mother, Cordelia's mother, was leeching off her husband and had a mask on to say, yes, I'm exactly what you want me to be. As soon as he was gone, they were partying it up. We don't have to work. We just play around, right? That's his idea of a patriarchal society, one where the man works and the women lie to their men and then enjoy the easy life, right?
On a personal level as in Handmaid's Tale. The characters in this novel, particularly Elaine, live in a constant state of observation from others, kind of.
No, that's a bullshit. Guys, I read this novel. He's lying. They weren't under observation. No, she was close friends with this girl, and her girlfriend was an abuser. That is it. This guy's lying. You're a liar. What is your name? What is your name? Educational. You're a liar. You are a liar. Educational.
Eyes on her, sort of panopticon of norm regulation. Cordelia and her friends from a young age watch over Elaine's every single action. And
No, they don't. They're not. This isn't 1984. No. Actually, what he's also leaving out is his girl, Cordelia. She actually tried to abuse one of the other girls. They were a group of four girls, and she tried to abuse one of the other girls, and it didn't work because the other girl would cry and draw attention and cause a scene where the protagonist would take it stoically. So this isn't even about her specifically. Cordelia, she would abuse anyone if she could. But there was a reason why she chose her, right? So this isn't about gender norms or any of the bullshit this guy's saying.
Reward her, or let's be honest, mainly punish her for pretty much every transgression that she does in their eyes. However, these are 9-year-old girls. These are
No, no, no. They didn't punish her because of transgressions. They were abusing her. Dude, she didn't do any transgressions. You're lying again.
ideas that they're kind of pushing onto Elaine aren't coming from nowhere. Obviously, every little sin or error that they put onto her is something that they have heard enforced into them from their parents.
No, 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 no. That didn't happen, everybody. What it was is like supposedly Cordelia's father was abusing her. And she was using the protagonist, I forget her name, as an outlet by abusing her, right? But in the end, the blame was put on the father, put on the man. The evil man made her do it. That's the bullshit propaganda, right? This guy's lying his ass off. You disgust me. Anyway, I don't think that we need to go any further because I think I've made my point with this. Okay, we'll listen to a little bit more.
Go along with us. And that's tactic number 2. The media doesn't demand change, it encourages growth. Hero does this super sneaky thing with his messaging. First up is it sets up this whole framework. There's a huge part of the movie. This idea that calligraphy is heavily related.
No, I'm wrong. I don't need to go any further than that. This is bullshit. Sorry, guys. Let's see, just double checking. Ad time, I don't care about your ads. No, I've made my point, so we don't need to go any further. Anyway, you can see how propaganda against men, it can't be treated as any other form of propaganda because men, they're all already in on it. As soon as the guy hits puberty, he's already a part of it, part of the matriarchy, a part of destroying his fellow man so he can pander to women, right? You don't need to fool men into anything. They want to believe. Or if they don't believe, they just make excuses for it. And that's what we have to fight against. So anyway, we'll end it here.